Honestly, I could not be bothered to play this game to full completion. The narrator is obnoxious and unfunny, with his humor and dialogue proving to be more irritating than entertaining. Unfunny? I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to make a serious work of art. I suppose I could write up a handful of gags to insert into the Stanley Parable, but the game is already such a densely layered web of profound philosophical insights that I can't even imagine where I'd have the room to stick them.
Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Corvus Cornix, and welcome to Yacc, yet another Crowcast where I pick a game, I play it for a week, and I'll talk about it. This week's game is the Stanley Parable Ultra Delux. It was released in 2022, and it's an interactive adventure. I will call it a walking sim with some interactivity. Developed by Galactic Cafe, or they changed the name, I guess, to Crows, and also published by them. And there will be spoilers up ahead, just so you know, but first a little backstory. So I remember Jacksepticeye playing the original game, Stanley Parable, and then I totally forgot about the game until I was browsing PSN last week, and I basically found this game, and I was very interested in playing it this week. So as you start up the game for the first time, you're prompted to answer a few questions, whether you played the original or not, and then you get introduced to the main menu. And this is kind of cool. There's like this small kind of computer screen where you move the between the options, which are begin new game or settings and credits. And if you do that on the big screen, it will follow along on a smaller computer screen, which is kind of cool. So you're Stanley, employee number 427. Your job is basically to sit in front of a computer and press buttons as they appear on screen. So one day, nothing happens. There's no command on the screen to follow, and nobody seems to be at the office, so he goes to explore the place. So the brilliant thing about this game is that Stanley is quiet, but there is like a narration of everything that Stan does and will do. And sometimes the narrator even tells him what he's supposed to do, and you can totally ignore it. So Kevin Brighting is the narrator, and he does a really good job. He sometimes acts very sarcastically, sometimes he's very funny, and it's just an overall nice experience to have a good voice narrating what you do and what you don't do. So you go through a normal office area with computers and printers and notes and whatnot, and they have some in-game jokes as well. There's like a mug that says who farted and whatnot, so some funny jokes. You interact with things with the X button, and I earned my first trophy, which was kind of funny. It's you can't jump, and that's true. It's like a walking simulator, and Stanley can't jump, except for there is an occasion to this where in the expansion, the Ultra Deluxe, there is a circle that you can enter, and you can jump a set number of times, and once you've done like 30 jumps, you can't jump anymore, it breaks, which is kind of funny. So I earned my first trophy, I can't jump. And then seconds later, a new trophy popped up saying you earned your first trophy, which is brilliant. So this game will introduce a couple of choices throughout the gameplay. So the first choice that you have to make as Stanley is, the narrator clearly says like Stanley went through the door to the left. And if you go to the left door, which I did, you will end up in a staircase. But if you take the right door, and other things will happen. And there are multiple endings to this game and multiple things that can happen through playthroughs, and none of the playthroughs are actually quite the same, I believe, so that's kind of cool. So you'll go to the meeting room to find some people to talk to, but there's no people there, and then the narrator says something like you have to go to your boss office to, fix things out. But on your way to your boss office, there's a broom closet. And this is a thing that's kind of funny. The narrator kind of gets angry if you go in and out of the closet multiple times. And then on the second playthrough, the door is actually barred up with planks and stuff. So, this game is right up my alley with the humor and everything. So you walk up a couple of stairs. You can go downstairs into a garage area, I believe. But for this playthrough, I went up for the stairs. And you end up in your boss's office. There's also a bathroom with a quote. I forgot the quote, but you walk into your boss office, and the narrator does the most brilliant thing when he says like, Stanley couldn't possibly know the code to the safe 2845. And if you stand along a bit, the narrator kind of gets angry at you and says like 2845. And this opened up a secret passageway which leads to an elevator. So after the elevator, you are prompted to go to two places. There is like a spray painted arrow that leads and says escape, which is not the correct way, or it depends on how you see it, but right ahead, the narrator tells you to go to the mind control room, and it's something like out of the Matrix, like with the architect. You walk into this huge circular room which has screens of all the employees, And this is also where there is like a secret and stuff. There's throughout the game there's this character called Jim, and there are a couple of other employee numbers that shows up on whiteboards and notes. So who is Jim? And it was kind of cool because he's on this like wall of TVs. So what you can do in the mind control facility is turn everything off and you walk out into a beautiful landscape. And that's one of the endings to the game. I don't know if it's the correct good ending, but that's one of them. And once the screen loads again, you're back at your office where you started the whole game. So for the second playthrough, I went through the door to the left, but I went down the stairs instead of going to my boss's office. And I ended up in a loop. There's like this corridor that loops around. And Stanley starts to questioning things. The narrator does a brilliant job of saying like, why was there a voice in my head all the time? Was this being narrated or something like that? And why, when Stanley looked down, he couldn't see his feet, which is this funny trope with FPS games because it's a lot hard to animate a body. And then the corridor loops again, and the narrator tells Stanley to shut his eyes because this could all just be a dream. But it turns out that it's not. So there's like a funny cutscene where a woman finds, I believe her name is Marielle. She finds Stanley passed out on the streets, and that's one of the endings. So on my third playthrough, I went through the office and I pushed a lot of buttons on computers and whatnot. And the narrator said like Stanley went around all of the office touching everything, but it didn't progress the plot. So this time I went up the stairs through my boss's office and I chose the escape option instead of the mind control room. So there was like I think it was like a train ride down to death, but it ends up changing a bit because now there's a female narrator and you end up in a white room. It's like a behind the scenes kind of thing, like a museum where they explain about the game itself, which is kind of meta. They even have small models like with cardboard of the whole office, and you get some insight on how you can change things. There's basically an on and off button, yet again very meta. But in the end, you actually die anyway. You get squashed in like a press or something. And the narrator even tells you like, turn off your PlayStation, which is like, what? I like when games does this. It was the same thing in Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, where there's a sequence where the colonel tells Raiden to shut off his game you've been playing for a long time, which is just brilliant in my opinion. So this game has a lot of choices, and I haven't even talked about the expanded Ultra Deluxe experience. After going a few rounds around the office, a door will be open where it says like the extra content or something like that. I go through that door and they try to amp up the game, but it's kind of funny because it's very undermined. It's like you go through an area, you can jump in a circle. They advertise a bottomless hole, but it's not really bottomless. You can actually reach the bottom. And there are a lot of Easter eggs with this, but the main attraction is the bucket. So this bucket is involved in all the endings in some way or not. There is this sequence where you get to an escape pod, but if you don't have the bucket, you actually the game just ends there. But if you have the bucket, you place the bucket in the escape pod and it goes away. So Stanley has this weird relationship with this bucket because even the narrator says like there's like something calm about holding a bucket, and there's some Easter eggs tied to the bucket as well. There's a small chance of a phone ringing in the beginning area in the office, and if Stanley has the bucket, there will be a conversation about a woman talking about his husband getting some groceries and whatnot, and then she mentions the bucket, and that's not her bucket or his bucket. It's really weird. And there are also some weird, it's kind of a funny thing. When you go to the new content area, you can go through one of the vents. The narrator kind of hints that you should do this because the game devs did a bad job. It's very meta, but they go through, he kind of changed the experience for Stanley to play. So he goes to like a museum area where they talk about the good reviews of the game. And then you go through the basement and you end up in the Steam review area. It's like a backyard with containers. All of them have the Steam logo on it. And the narrator gets upset because he reads one of the negative reviews about the narrator not being funny and audio clips kind of going over each other because you move too fast in the game, and the narrator kind of says like funny, and he kind of remarks on the word. It's even more funny because Steam can leave some pretty shitty reviews in my opinion, and it's just funny that even the game developers kind of made a joke out of it, insulting the narrator himself. So I will not spoil too much of the game. Go and play it because this is a phenomenal game in my opinion. So gameplay. Help employee 427 Stanley figure out what's going on, explore the office and get the different endings. Control, the left stick moves around, moves Stanley I mean. The right stick is camera look, X interact with things, options pauses the game, and L1 ducks. There's a couple of occasions we need to duck going through ventilation ducts and whatnot. Graphics. So this game was made in the Source engine and it looks exactly like Half-Life 2, a bit more cleaned up. And it basically looks like an office should. So they did a good job. Sound and music. Blake Robinson, Janice, and Christian Blake made the music for this game. And it's good. Not very memorable, but it's there. Also, I love that Kevin Brighting's brilliant narrating. And it kind of elevates the game to a very high score for me because he's very... he can be irritated as Stanley. It can be... sarcastic. He puts on the flavor of the thing, and when you go against his will, he says like go to the door to the left when you go to the right just to spite him. There's this segment where if you take the right door, which is obviously the wrong door, you will end up with two doors, one blue and one red eventually. So go through the red door, and if you spite him, the door will, you won't have that option anymore. And it leads down a pretty dark path about Stanley actually trying to kill himself just to, get away with the narrator, and it restarts the game. So there's so many ways that, this game can be played in different endings and Easter eggs and whatnot. And I even forgot about it, but I'll talk about it in the Easter eggs sequence. Easter eggs, secrets, and glitches. So there are some Easter eggs in this game. One of the maps actually loads you in a Rocket League scenario where you're running around and putting in balls into the net. Another one is a parody of the Firewatch. That game with there's like a woodsman in a high up watchtower looking out at the forest, and the narrator does the brilliant job of saying that this guy who is up here probably must be a weirdo, spying on people. And once you walk outside of the tower, the narrator stops you by putting up concrete or brick walls because we don't want any open world games, which is like boxing in the player. And there are different endings as well. One of the more funnier ones, Stanley can't jump, but in the office area you can kind of get up on the chairs and out the window, and it reveals like there's like an illusion, like a white box thing, and the narrator sings a song about Stanley, which is hilarious. In conclusion, I wrote, play it, yes, absolutely. It's funny humor right up my alley. The narration is brilliant. I love the humor and the choices that you can make. I didn't even get through all the choices because... even the Ultra Deluxe experience is so vast. Once you complete the first part of Stanley Parable, the original content thing, you pushed into the extended Ultra Deluxe. It's so much to take in, and all the endings with the bucket and without the bucket, and all the crazy stuff that can happen. There are many things to go through. So as I said, I love the humor. Go play it. It's a good game. It's worth it. It wasn't full price either, so it's like a good pick. So anyway, thanks for listening and for watching, and take care.